going to be an interesting night. Ground is treacherous. If you had a heart attack out here, you would just die. The wind here is just too much. I'm afraid I'll have to take cover in the woods. These are the kind of trips that really make you feel alive. Lots of things have went wrong today. I have to have a bug out solution. It was a wildly stormy night. One big tree right there. There's my car. See how even a woodland can become flooded pretty quickly. The wind really picked up last night. Very wet, very overcast. And there's some strong winds blowing in as well every now and again. It's going to be an interesting night. It gets very dark very early, particularly when it's overcast like this. It's only 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Getting down the wet ferns is one thing. Getting back up will be another. I'll worry about that tomorrow. I just fell down a hole that was like 3 foot deep. There's actually a little stream under there. All the grass has grown over it so you can't see. Very dangerous. You can hear it. Ground is treacherous. I'm just going to let myself cool down a little bit, vent some hot air. I don't want to sweat underneath these waterproofs. I wouldn't say it was deep wilderness. There's a road, a short road that I came in on. This is actually a popular place in Scotland for van campers and things like that, but they never come down to this part. And if you were to break a leg down here, I've got no phone signal. I would have to crawl my way back up to that road, which would take a very long time. If you had a heart attack out here, you would just die. Something to bear in mind if you choose to do this kind of more on the edge kind of wild camping. I kind of love it though. It's a really scenic spot, but the wind here is just too much. Yeah, that camping spot down by the river was spectacular, but the wind is getting wild and the rain is intermittent. The waters actually came up a little bit, even from just the short period of time that I've been down here, so I'm afraid I'll have to take cover in the woods. Just in there. how much the camera will be able to see now. It's getting pretty dark. I set up my tarp quite near the river. There is very heavy rain. The river does look a bit sketchy, and also the wind was picking up in places, so I've retreated into this tree line and I'm going to reset up my tarp in here. This is one of these things, if you're going to do wild camping and you're just using things like tarps, you really need to get comfortable with being able to do it in the pretty much zero visibility, and the cold, the rain, the wind. If you always do these things in the summer, with a can of beer and nice warm sunshine, you'll never be able to do it this way. And these are the kind of trips that really make you feel alive. Let's see if I can set up in here and I'll come back to you. Oh, hopefully you can see and hear me. I'm using a super bright little LED work light I picked up from Aldi. Works great as a sort of camp lantern, but it is quite bright. We'll see. So the situation just now is, I've got into the tree line and set up this tarp again. I did have it elsewhere, but I came in out the wind and away from the river because it looks a bit sketchy. It's been a hell of a day. Lots of things have went wrong today. I got here late because of the car, and when I got here, I knew it was going to rain and I knew there was going to be wind today, but I got here much later than I wanted to get here, and there's nothing worse than trying to set up a wild camp in a wilderness type place in the dark, and then add wind and rain to that mix, and you know, you're going to have a bad time. Now, this isn't an ideal setup. To be honest, I don't think I've ever had an ideal setup before, so I'll make do with what I've got just now. I'm out the rain, but there is still a bit of a breeze blowing through here, so I'll probably need to readjust this tarp to suit the weather. My priority was just to get into cover, set this tarp up, so I'm not getting continuously rained on. They're not the best trees to take shelter from in the wind. They're those, you know, pine trees that have been planted by somebody, and they do tend to fall down in high wind, but I don't think the wind is going to be that bad tonight, hopefully. And I'm on the edge, which is why there's still a bit of a wind coming through here, so if it was to happen, hopefully they would miss me. So I tend to find that the best thing to do when you end up in a little bit of a situation like this, where it's you're not overly comfortable, it's not enjoyable at the moment, let's put it that way, is I'm out the rain, I'm out most of the wind. I'm going to allow my body to acclimatise to the conditions, work on this tarp a little bit more. Once I think I've got it as good as it's going to be, just relax, make a cup of tea, set up my bed for tonight, and you know, do some more stuff in the morning, assuming I make it to the morning. Now, if you're doing a lot of tarp camping, something like these adjustable Basha poles are really excellent. I got these ones from One Tigress to try out. They come in 3 sections, you get 2 of them, and they're extendable, so I'll do a review on them at some point maybe, but you can see how it's also got a point at the end, so you can stick it through the grommets of these military style tarps. I've got most of my stuff out and ready now, so I've got an insulated mat down underneath me. I'm just sitting and I'm relaxing a little bit and I'm assessing my situation minute by minute to sort of see what's going on. Now, hopefully you can see me. I'm using that work light, but it's blinding the hell out of me, but hopefully you can see because it's obviously pitch black where I am. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing with tarp camping. I love tarps. They're incredibly versatile. You can use them in almost any situation, in almost any place, and you're far more connected to the outdoors than what you are when you're in a tent, because you're never really entirely enclosed in a tarp, you know, unless you make an enclosed version of it, but usually they're open to some extent, and you really feel every little bit of weather that's happening, you know, just outside. You still get the breeze coming in through it. You don't get wet. If you are, then you've set it up wrong. So it's raining on and off pretty heavy at the moment, and I'm under some trees as well, but I can really you can hear the wind coming down through the forest off the mountains to where I'm at. That's the thing about using a tarp in a place like the mountains, especially at this time of year. The weather is entirely unpredictable, and you have to really prepare for the absolute worst that weather can be for this time of year in this place, and it can be really, really bad. Wind is always the problem. Snow's okay, rain's okay, but wind can cause you problems. Wind is when trees and stuff start falling down. Rain to some extent can cause landslides and stuff, but as long as you're not near a place like that, then you're okay. But it's hard to avoid wind tearing your tarp away if you're in an exposed place, or a tree falling on you or something like that. A lot of jigging about taking place. A lot of the wind was coming in from one end, so I've had to drop the tarp down very low at one end, and then I've raised it slightly. At the other end. Rains went off at the moment, but the wind has picked up a bit, so the fun continues. So in situations like this, you've really just got to continuously assess what your options are and make judgments and adjust as best you can. Really, it's just about cover. You have to have layers of cover. So my first layer of protection at the moment is the clothing that I'm wearing. Okay, I've got my merino wool base layers underneath. I'm not cold, even though it's quite cold outside. I've got waterproof trousers, waterproof jacket, welly boots on, decent socks. I've also got a change of clothes, just in case I take a dive into a river. I've also got some cold weather clothing with me as well, because I knew I would be in the mountains and the temperature can drop quite a lot. And because it's dark so early now, you're stationary a lot of the time. If you can get away with building a fire or something, that's great, but obviously I knew the weather was going to be particularly wet and windy, so you're not really going to have much of a fire in these kind of conditions. So I mean, the next layer of protection is you've got your tarp, your shelter. A tent is obviously a lot more versatile when it comes to being fully enclosed, so you can camp on the summit of a mountain in a tent, no problem. I wouldn't take a tarp on the summit of a mountain, but at the base of mountains like this, obviously I would. When I'm sleeping tonight, my sleeping bag and myself will be inside another bivvy bag, so even though every now and again you get little bits of moisture blowing in, you know, carried in off the wind through the side of the tarp, which you don't get a lot of it, but you'll get a little bit of it, I'm still protected from that. You've also got to realise as well that tarps, for all their versatility, can also fail very easily. It doesn't take much for one of the corners, you know, the eyelet to break, the peg to snap or come out, or anything, and you know, unlike a tent, it only really needs one end to fail for the whole thing to sort of collapse in on itself, and it's just flapping around in the wind. You also have to have a bug out plan. So if it all goes to shit tonight, for example, let's say a severe storm just happens to sort of pick up, one that isn't forecast, which is entirely possible in the mountains, or the trees around me start falling down, or riverbank bursts and reaches all the way to where I am at just now, I have to have a bug out solution. I know which way I came in, and even though it's dark, I could make my way back out that way. I've got my head torch. You know, you have to make sure you've got your head torch handy, your mobile phone on your person, your car keys on your person, things like that. Ultimately, I could just, as I'm dressed right now, head back the way I came, slowly making my way through the cold, wet, windy, dark trail back up to where I've parked my car. That would probably take me about an hour, but you know, it could be a situation where you suffer for an hour and get back to a car, or you suffer for, you know, 7 or 8 hours over a night time in an unsafe situation. Tell you what, something you need to get used to doing if you're going to camp in bad weather under tarps is do everything in a very small space. That can be a pain in the arse sometimes. And setting up my sleep system, I've always preferred to use a fairly wide bivvy. One with a zip would actually be quite good. I don't have one with a zip, but this is an old British Army or Dutch Army style bivvy bag, and I've always preferred to put my mats inside the bag rather than put the mat underneath it, because you tend to slide off them in the night. In cold weather, I'll use a closed cell foam mat like this, which I always put inside my larger bag, my Bergen, kind of like lining, and then an inflatable mat on top of that. So the closed cell foam mat, apart from also just providing extra warmth and comfort, it also helps prevent punctures for your inflatable mat. But I tell you what, try to get both of these mats and your sleeping bag inside a bivvy bag, well enclosed in a very low tarp while a storm is going on outside, is no mean feat. I feel like I've got whiplash now, but it's done, it's in. I have seen somebody online once put the inflating mat inside the bivvy bag, deflated, and then he inflated it while it was inside the bag, and you know, he said that made it a bit easier. I tried that once, it didn't work out that well, so I've just never tried it again. As you can see, the setup I currently have, the wind is mostly coming in from that end. I've lowered the tarp down, I've put my Bergen at that end as well. That's also where my head end is going to be, so this is going to now become like my pillow. All of this stuff, bring my sleep system up, and then the foot end is there, but I might end up coming a little bit more cross section, purely because there is a little bit of rain coming in at that end, but for the most part it doesn't look too bad. I've taken my waterproof jacket off and put on this hoodie, and really the main reason for that is because waterproofs, you can actually sweat in them quite easily, so you want to try and avoid sweating in your waterproofs. So you just take the hit of feeling a little bit cold for a few minutes while you stick on your warm or dry layers. But you have to make sure that if you're going to go back out in the rain, to do the wet dry layering system if you need be, or if you're going to be here for a period of time. I've still got my waterproof trousers on, but I'm going to take them off shortly. Get myself set up here, make something to eat, have a cup of tea, chill for a bit. when it's cold, it takes a little bit of time to get these alcohol stoves to go. Once they heat up, they're pretty efficient and they stay lit, but take a little bit of time to get there. Going to have myself one of these broth noodles. I think they're pretty good. They're kind of like a noodle soup, you know. A hot broth noodle soup on a cold, stormy night is always welcome. Even came with its own cardboard spark. It took way longer than it should have to heat that water. I barely even managed to get to a boil actually. It's about 4 degrees Celsius at the moment, and there is quite a bit of wind and breeze still blowing through here, so that was affecting it a bit. But yeah, alcohol stoves, they're not really the best for cold weather type conditions, but that's what I brought with me this time. What I'm going to do now, I've been monitoring the weather, you know, as I've been here, and it seems to be there's moments for about, you know, 30-40 minutes at a time where there's quite strong winds followed by some rain, and then it calms down and then you've just got little bits of rain. That seems to be the pattern of the night so far. There's always the chance that the wind could get much stronger, so what I'm going to do in this kind of environment, you need to think of your bug out plan really. So I'm going to let that water heat those noodles and that broth. I added a little bit extra water than it tells you to do, so it's more like a soup than anything. Hear that? Wow, the wind is just really powering through these trees. I'm in the most sheltered part I could find. So in any case, because of that, my sleeping arrangements tonight are going to be, I'm going to take my boots off. I've got wellies with me, so I'm going to take them off, and what I like to do is, I've got a little dry bag, and I'm going to put things like my car keys, my phone, put it on charge, power bank, this camera, my head torch, my camp knife. I put all that into a little dry bag. I wrap it up in my cotton net that I've got for a bit of insulation, and put that in one of my boots, because then I know all of that stuff is right there and I can grab that stuff. You know, as long as I've got my car keys and a head torch, I can get out of, I could bug out of here at very short notice, and my wellies would be right there to put on. So I'm actually going to stay clothed. I don't normally do that. Normally you're actually better off going into your sleeping bag with as little clothes as possible, from a thermal point of view, hygiene point of view, and also just, it's, you know, ticks are still a possibility. Even at this time of year, there's lots of deer around here, so there's lots of ticks around here, and if you take your clothes off and give yourself a bit of a check over, then get into your sleeping bag, you're a lot safer. But in this case, I'm just going to do a little bit of a once over, and then just get in the sleep bag with my clothes on. That way, if I need to, I don't need to mess around. There would be nothing worse than a tree falling on your tarp, you know, or about to fall on your tarp, and you were able to escape, but you found yourself, you know, practically butt-ass naked out in the storm with an hour's walk back to a car. You can imagine how exposure could catch you out pretty quickly in that situation. So yeah, that's the plan, and we'll see what happens in the morning. It was a wildly stormy night. It's still pretty windy now as well. Sunrise is right about now. One big tree right there. There's my car. There's a huge tree that's fallen. See how even a woodland can become flooded pretty quickly. So that's the thing I hate about wind. You come to these really stunning locations and you end up having to hunker down in some trees somewhere to avoid getting blown off your feet. And it really prevents you from doing a lot of things. But that's that's part of the charm of camping in the mountains. You don't get to pick the weather. The wind really picked up last night. Amazingly, the tarp held together though. None of the ends pulled out or anything like that, which was my main concern. Well, trees falling on me was my main concern, and that almost happened. There's an easier way down to the place I camped last night than the way I went down, but that's the danger of wild camping in the late evening when you're trying to race against wind, rain and light. You can sometimes end up taking these crazy off-piste routes that this might be easier, but it's still tiring. A long way up this hill.